In this video, we want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of various training methods. So if we start with types of training and look at the various types of training we can imagine under various situations or circumstances. So we have on-the-job instructions, which is one type of training. We also have job rotation, shadowing, project-related training, we'll talk about that later as well, and coaching and mentoring. So we have 5 different types of on-the-job instructions which we can look at in the first part of this video. And we'll start with on-the-job instructions. So let's look at the advantages and disadvantages of various types of issues associated with on-the-job instructions. So first of all, the advantages. Well, it's cost effective and economical. It's quite cheap. So it's on-the-job instructions. The trainee is working on the job and getting advice and direction whilst working on the job. So it is quite cost effective. There is an outcome which is an outcome which contributes towards the revenue of the organization. It's an output which is useful. It can be perhaps sold. So it's cost effective and it's economical. However, bad habits and working techniques can be passed on if the trainer is inexperienced. So the fact that there is one person training another on the job to complete various tasks, the trainer may, him or herself, have acquired bad working habits over the years, or bad working techniques, which would then be passed on to the trainee. So there are disadvantages of this type of on-the-job instructions. It's also the case that the trainee receives immediate feedback and improvements can be made. So that's an advantage. The advantage is the trainee was performing the tasks set out by the trainer, working on the job. The trainee can get instantaneous feedback. The feedback is immediate. It's very appropriate. The task has been overseen by an expert, by someone who has done the task perhaps many times, who has a lot of experience in performing the task. So there is good quality feedback and immediate feedback for the trainee. Could have, however, a negative impact on productivity. For example, the trainee makes errors or works slower than the team. So the fact that the trainee is working on the job could mean that the trainee makes mistakes which will hold up everyone associated with that particular job. If the job is part of a long process with various stages, and the trainee makes a mistake on one of the stages, then perhaps the whole job will be held up, will be slowed down as a consequence of the trainee. So there is a problem about having a trainee working on the job, learning on the job, that it could slow down the whole process of work, and there could be a loss of productivity as a consequence. There's the establishment of better working relationship with trainee and instructor. As the trainee and the instructor work together, they form better relationship. They understand each other. They understand their abilities, their capabilities, their competencies. They understand what they can do and what they can't do, and there's a better understanding between them. So it leads to a better working relationship. However, the disadvantage is insufficient theory and knowledge. The work that the trainee is given may be how to do something, not why they are doing it. So the trainee does not develop in terms of decision making. The trainee rather knows how to do the job, not why the job is being done. Training is specific and to a purpose or for a purpose. There's a high transfer of learning. So the training is very focused. It's focused to learn some skill or perform some particular function. And there is a good transfer of learning from one person to the other, from the trainer to the trainee. There's a high transfer of skills. However, it's one-to-one. So the disadvantage is it's not suitable for large groups of trainees. If there are large groups of trainees, there may not be enough trainers to take on the task of training them. There may not be enough trainers or enough people with the experience or the ability to act as trainers. So we see in the context of on-the-job instructions that there are a list of advantages and some disadvantages. The next one is job rotation. Again, advantages and disadvantages. Well, with job rotation there are opportunities to develop new skills and knowledge, experience, and getting more exposure to work in different roles. So an employee does various tasks and as a consequence has a wider set of skills, is more flexible within the workplace because he or she has performed different tasks. However, the disadvantage is that it interrupts the working patterns and schedules. The employees, the trainees I should say, are moving from one set of tasks to another. So there is disruption to the working pattern. Schedules of work are being disrupted because the trainees are moving from one set of tasks to another. It all has to be coordinated and work must continue. So the fact that one group of workers is changing tasks because of job rotation means that the continuity of the work might be at risk. There's also the increased productivity as job rotation prevents boredom and demotivation. Well, it's the case that humans need stimulus. They need to be interested. They need to have a challenge. And if people are doing the same task over and over, perhaps the same small task over and over, they get bored, which may lead to absenteeism from work, a loss of productivity. They may even leave the company to try and find alternative employment elsewhere which is more enriching. The disadvantage is it's costly to train employees for different job roles. If an employee picks up a set of skills in a particular task, that's the cheapest way for the company to use that employee, not having the employee skilled in many different areas. That's costly to do, even though it gives the employee more flexibility and gives the organization more flexibility. But in terms of training, it's far more expensive to have employees trained in many different tasks. It's very similar to discussions on the division of labour. The division of labour is when people gain competencies and skills in a very limited set of skills, a very limited set of tasks. They apply themselves to those set of tasks, they perform them very well, and over a period of time, learning by doing, they become more proficient, more expert, and faster. So if they're moved around to various tasks and acquiring skills in performing various tasks, it's costly for the organization. Job rotation allows employees to fill other roles due to absenteeism. Well, that's the flexibility I talked about a moment ago. The organization is able to fill tasks if employees are away ill, for example, in the winter time, or for whatever reason, then the employees who are there are able to move between tasks because they have acquired those skills. Despite the fact that that's a very costly exercise for the organization, that's a possible benefit. So production is able to continue even when some key employees are away, absent for whatever reason. The disadvantages can also have a negative impact on productivity. It takes time to learn new skills and train employees. So job rotation is not just expensive, tying up resources and tying up the trainer's time and so on, but it takes time to learn new skills and train employees, and that's expensive and has a negative impact on productivity, because the employees, the trainees who go in to learn the new tasks, will start by being very unproductive. They will have to build up their skills, and just when they build up their skills to being productive, they move to the next set of tasks, and that's the idea of job rotation. So in effect, the employees are not very productive throughout the training cycle. The advantages, another advantage is it helps management identify hidden talents. When job rotation is used, the management may observe the employees, the trainees, they observe them, and the trainees may have particular aptitudes for certain tasks. So the management are able to match the trainees against certain tasks, and they know where they can use those employees most efficiently later on. However, it's also the case that job rotation may impact on the quality of products and services. Job rotation means the trainee is not very skilled, may not understand all of the procedures, the workmanship may not be of very high quality, and the quality of the product itself is impaired as a consequence. So in this set we've seen job rotation. We've seen some of the advantages on the left and some of the disadvantages on the right. So it's not clear cut that job rotation is a good thing. Another form of on-the-job instructions is shadowing. Again, advantages and disadvantages of shadowing. Well, the advantages are the observer gains experience of the job and its roles and responsibilities. So the observer, the trainee, can watch how the job is done by an expert, by someone who's highly trained in the area. So they watch and they learn. And that's the idea of shadowing. They are learning by observation. The disadvantage is the observer may pick bad habits from the other employees. The person who is the expert, who's performing the task, may have picked up bad habits over the years, bad working practices or unsafe working practices even, maybe cutting corners, going faster in some areas than they should, or not being sufficiently diligent to avoid accidents or whatever. So it may be the observer is picking up some bad habits as well. So there has to be care observed, put in place when shadowing is used. The observer has the opportunity to develop relationships within the team. So the trainee or the observer can develop relationships with quite skilled people and will get to know personalities and will get to know their techniques and will observe these, and they will be able to, in a sense, network within the organization with a team of skilled individuals. They will get to know those skilled individuals, they will know how they work, they've made observations. Albeit, as I said earlier, they might observe things that are perhaps not such good practice, but they've learned from making observations. Disadvantages: there may be a reluctance to share information, as some employees may feel intimidated. So some key workers may be reluctant to share information with learners. They may feel intimidated, they feel that they're not good communicators, they may feel that they're not up to the task of training, and they don't want to be observed. It puts them off. It makes the tasks more difficult for them. There's also related to this is the fact that, of course, some expert workers, some skilled workers may feel threatened that they are teaching other people their skills and their tricks of the trade, and that later on those trainees will replace them, and they will be made redundant and replaced by these new people, by the trainees eventually. So there might be a reluctance on their part to pass on their skills and their tricks and their ways of working. Shadowing does have an advantage of opportunities for future employment. The trainee is able to pick up skills and observe the way the expert workers go about their tasks. They may learn how to use specialist machinery and specialist equipment, and they make observations about how to set up the machines or set up the techniques and how to go about it generally. So they are picking up perhaps transferable skills which will enable them to develop their careers most effectively. However, it can be difficult to schedule and can disrupt working patterns. Shadowing can be difficult to schedule. Trying to find appropriate trainers to match the trainees and to try and fit in the trainees in a way that will not disrupt the trainers from working, and it will not absorb too much of their time, and they will lose productivity as a consequence. It's difficult to schedule all of that and to try and fit in the trainees in a way that doesn't disrupt the flow of work. Observe and take part in tasks. This increases confidence. Shadowing can lead the trainee to make observations and eventually to help the artisan, help the skilled worker perform the task by completing some tasks and preparing some parts of the work and having it ready for the skilled person. So they're working with them, and over a period of time they will be taking on more and more responsibility within the tasks. So they will gain in confidence as they become more involved with the skilled worker in completing tasks. It can be demotivating, however, if experience is voluntary with no pay. Sometimes organizations invite, say, unemployed young people to work with them within their organization for work experience, but there is no pay. And they feel demoralized. They still have bills to pay and they still have their lives to lead. And they're acquiring skills and picking up skills as they go through, but they find it very difficult, and they find it very unfair that they're making a contribution and they're attending and learning and doing all that's asked of them, but not being rewarded in any way. Project-related training. Well, again, advantages and disadvantages. Employees experience working in groups and take on leadership roles. So project-related training is when trainees work on a particular project, and in this case they work in groups. They learn how to work in groups. They understand the dynamics of the groups and who are leaders and who are followers, and they know how to negotiate and so on. And this is to the advantage of the trainee, because when they go through different organizations in the future, they will have these particular sets of skills and they'll know how to compromise and how to move forward. A disadvantage of project-related training could be working in groups can result in disagreements and individuals may not perform their tasks adequately. Well, working in groups doesn't mean that compromises can always be found. It could be that some members of the group simply do not wish to cooperate, or do not wish to share experiences, or do not wish to work with others. So there might be a breakdown in the group, and that could be a danger to this type of training. There are opportunities to gain skills and experiences through project-related training. A group is given a project to complete. The project may have different aspects to it, managerial aspects, engineering aspects, design aspects. There could be an aesthetic component or a health and safety issue. There are different skills that projects may have associated with them, and the trainee will acquire those skills and see others working on them, on the particular aspects, and they will learn from talking to the others as well. They work in a group, they share the experiences. It's difficult to organize team meetings when employees have other jobs and duties to complete. So working on a project, if it's not full-time, it may be difficult to organize team meetings, to try and get the whole team together to share their experiences and to plan out their work and be more analytical and more thoughtful about what they're doing. They find it difficult to meet. So it depends on the resources of the organization, whether they have allocated time for the meetings and slots for the meetings. If they haven't, if it's something that the group is expected to do whenever they have a chance, then it may be difficult to organize. Projects are aimed at a purpose and meet organizational aims and objectives. So the trainees who work on particular projects, project-related training, they see the project as contributing towards the organization, towards the attainment of its corporate objectives, towards some issue, resolving some problem within the business. So they understand the importance of the project and they feel more committed as a consequence. However, least confident group members tend to become overshadowed by more confident group members. Whenever people work in teams, some people become dominant, others become followers. And to that end, they become branded as followers and others become dominant and focal and leaders. So there is an element of people finding their positions determined from the activities of the group. The management will see them as followers and they will slot them into tasks where they can live out that type of existence, that type of role. Others will be leaders and they may go into management and work their way up the managerial ladder, for example. Develop team working skills. All team workers share a common goal and it's easier to complete tasks. So they understand the importance of working in teams. They understand that when there are problems with the project, for example, with the work, they're able to share the problem with others, talk to others, find solutions, get different perspectives on the problem and work forward. So they find it easier to complete tasks. They're all working towards solving the problems and getting the project completed. So they're working as a team. They understand the importance of team working. So those are some of the issues associated with project-related training. Now we go to coaching and mentoring. Again, advantages and disadvantages. Well, flexible approach learning is at the pace of the learner needs. So it's a very flexible way of learning. They're being mentored. They're being taught by an expert member of staff, but it's not continuous. They're mentored from time to time. They can go and see the person with particular problems and issues if they wish. So the learning is at the pace at which the learner needs. The coach or mentor may not have the right skills, however, or the right qualifications. Simply having a mentoring program doesn't mean that the right mentors are there. The organization may not have sufficient mentors, or the mentors may not be adequately trained. They may not have the personal qualities to be a good mentor. They may not have the experience. They may not have the understanding. So it's important that the organization find appropriate mentors to teach the mentee, and to give the mentee knowledge, experience and confidence, and generally support the efforts of the mentee, the person who has been mentored. Feedback is instant and improvements made on the job. So whenever there are issues, the mentor can become involved and make recommendations and suggestions, and perhaps give a demonstration, and generally work through a problem, so that improvements are made instantaneously. The person who's been mentored will understand the logic, understand the process, and they will be able to institute that the next time they encounter similar circumstances. Senior management and staff may be unwilling to take on the task of mentoring, especially if the additional responsibility is unpaid. It's often the case within organizations. People are invited to become mentors, but they're not paid for the extra effort. So many will shy away from becoming mentors because it's extra work, it's extra responsibility, and there's no reward for doing it. No financial reward for doing it in many organizations. So some will shy away, which means the organization may find it difficult to find appropriate mentors. Trainee is self-motivated and willing to learn. Well, that's an advantage. The employee, or the trainee, or the mentee, is someone who understands the mentoring system, understands that they have to make a good effort to try and complete tasks, understand the tasks, and learn by doing, and understand they should consult the mentor when it's necessary to do so. They should not absorb the mentor's time. They should not make the task into a two-person task. It's a one-person task. It's simply, if they hit a problem, they go to the mentor and get solutions and get recommendations. But they should not run to the mentor on a regular basis for tasks which they themselves could solve if they showed more initiative. It's a time-consuming task and requires motivation and dedication from the trainee and the mentor. It is an extra layer of work for the mentor. The mentor has to do his or her tasks as normal, and in addition to those has to mentor someone else and keep an eye on someone else, give them guidance and suggestions and talk to them and get them to understand. It's an extra layer, and as I said, it may be unpaid. So it is time consuming. It does sap energy. Opportunities to work with senior managers and staff. Well, the mentoring scheme may involve opportunities to work with senior managers and staff. It depends on what the mentoring scheme is. It may be it doesn't involve those staff, but some may. And sometimes the fact that an organization has introduced mentoring as a process within its organization means it may want to look at certain employees and cultivate them for more senior positions by getting them a wider range of experiences and knowledge about the product and the processes of the organization, by getting them appropriate mentors, experts from within the organization, to teach them particular skills and particular ways of working. Mentor poor work ethic can have an adverse effect on the trainee. If the mentor doesn't have a good work ethic, if the mentor is not very careful or has a bad attitude towards the organization, or a bad attitude towards timekeeping, or towards maintenance of tools and equipment, or whatever it is, if the mentor has a poor work ethic, this could rub off on the trainee. They're just simply spreading bad practice from one person to another. It's like contagion. The one person has bad working practices, so the other person who's been mentored by that person will pick up those bad practices. So as we can see from the list here on the slide, there are advantages and there are disadvantages, and they just need to be borne in mind. Mentoring is not a panacea. Now, types of training. Well, one type of training could be courses or e-learning courses. These could be courses within the organization, or courses at local colleges or whatever, or it could be e-learning. Another type of training is reading or looking at case studies and learning from what is read and the case studies. It's a type of training. It could be lectures and seminars, again a type of training. It could be outdoor training, or it could be business related games which simulates business activity and gets the trainee to think more strategically, perhaps. And it could be role play or behavior modeling. So we have a whole variety of types of training that we need to look at, and that's what we're going to do in the remaining slides of this session. We're going to start by looking at e-learning and courses and see what these advantages and disadvantages are. So e-learning and courses, well, flexible. Learning takes place around the learner's schedule. So e-learning is something which has become very popular, and it's a system whereby the learner can access learning material whenever he or she finds it convenient to do so. Now contrast that with, say, going to a traditional college. Well, the traditional class will be held at a certain time. The class may be at 2 p.m. and if the person can't make 2 p.m, that person misses the class. But if the class is online, it can be accessed anytime. It can be accessed many times. So there are advantages of this type of learning. However, learners with low motivation and poor study skills will fall behind. There is no routine structure of the classroom environment. This is the individual learning. The individual learning, so the individual must have high motivation to learn, and if the person does not have high motivation, and if the person has poor study skills, they're not sure how to study, then those people will not learn significantly from e-learning courses. Online courses are cheaper and more accessible. There's no cost involved in travelling, for example. The students or the trainees do not have to travel to a local college, perhaps in traffic jams, and then pay for parking or go by bus and waiting for buses or whatever it is. It's an inconvenience. Whereas online, it simply comes to their telephone or through their laptop or their iPad or whatever access point they've got. However, learners can become isolated as there can be limited face-to-face contact. As humans, we like having contact with our fellow man, our fellow species. We like to talk to people. We like to interact with them. It's a very human thing. And if we are simply learning from texts and learning from study material, we can become somewhat alienated. And it's important to recognize this and have mechanisms built in that will maintain interaction and maintain a sense of community and learning. Learning is tailored to the learner's needs. Well, generally speaking, for many courses that can be the case, that only particular classes that are relevant for particular courses will be put online, and the learner can then focus in on the classes that he or she needs specifically. And many organizations are starting to do that. They're making their own training programs available online so that the trainees within an organization can access material about the organization, about the products and the processes and so on, and access them online whenever they wish. There are, however, technological issues that may be important. It may be difficult to access online resources, for example. The internet may not be ever present. It may not be everywhere, or the internet may be slow in some parts. So there may be issues about access. It does build self-confidence and learner confidence. Learning is geared to the learner's pace. The learner can study a lot or study a little or spread it out or go back over it again, learn it a second time, make notes from it, move on, learn something new, move back. So it's all to the learner has got power. The learner can organize his or her study pattern. So it builds self-knowledge and learner confidence. They're learning by taking control of the resource. However, learners need to be IT literate and demonstrate computer-based competency. They must be able to access the material, which may be accessed on a browser, or it may be through some specialist VLE, virtual learning environment, some piece of software that's designed for learning purposes. So the trainee or the student may have to access those specialist online facilities. They must be able to perhaps cut and paste and use normal Windows type functions, or if they're using an Apple, the equivalent functions. They must be able to move information across into other applications and organize the information and so on. So they must have IT literacy. They must be capable of working with the technology. Next, reading and case studies. Well, the use of case studies helps to analyze complex concepts and theories. Case studies can give us an insight into very complex issues and complex theories. The case study approach is very powerful because we can see similar situations, perhaps to the one we're working in, written up as a case study, and we can figure out what happened at the end. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give us an indication of what's going to happen within the organization within which we're working in. It doesn't mean that. It just means this similar situation arose there and this was the outcome. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to apply equally in every organization. But it's an insight. The disadvantages: the use of case studies is time consuming, especially for short training courses. If the organisation is running a short training course, perhaps half a day, on some particular topic, if the trainer gives out case studies, by the time everyone has read the case studies, thought about them, thought about the case study, let's say, by the time they've done that and perhaps got down to some discussion, the training event will be over. There will be no time to reflect or to discuss deeper. So it depends on the time allocated as to whether case studies are appropriate or not. Learners can relate to real-life situations and apply solutions to workplace problems. Well, learners, through the study of cases, can see what happened in particular circumstances with perhaps quite famous organisations. The case studies may be based on real organisations and will be perhaps instantly recognisable to the reader. So they're able to see real situations and see how problems were resolved in real situations. However, it may be difficult to find case studies that are directly relevant to particular training courses. There are many case studies available, but particular organisations may find relevant case studies difficult to find. Relevant to their circumstances, I mean, relevant to their type of industry, to their type of production, to their type of situation. So it may be difficult to find those. Reading develops knowledge of concepts and theories and their applications. So getting people to read case studies is getting them to develop their critical faculties, getting them to read, understand, link points together, become more analytical. However, there can be more than one right answer. Different people will have different perspectives on the right solution. There's problems with validation. So when the case study is read, somebody may read the case study and analyze it in one particular direction. Somebody else reads it and analyzes it in a different way, and there's no coherence. They don't come to the same conclusions. That can often be the case. So it needs someone to discuss the case with them, spend time with them, for them to reflect, perhaps come back to the case, read it again, discuss it, try to resolve the differences. It's time consuming and it's hard work. And even then there may be no single answer. They do encourage a range of skills: analytical, as I said, communications, team working and problem solving. So these are strengths of case studies and the case study approach. The method is suited to an advanced level of training rather than basic training. Reviewing a case study requires a level of maturity. So ideally case studies should be used at more advanced levels of study, when the trainees or the students or the employees have acquired a wide set of skills, analytical skills, have more experience and also have more knowledge of theories and working practices and so on. So they're able to make more informed and more detailed comments about the case. They're able to use the case more effectively, in other words. So ideally the people using the cases should be further along in their training and their development. They shouldn't be at the starting phase. They should be closer to the end phase. And at that stage, case studies may be more effective. Now, lectures and seminars as training tools. Well, it's good for a large group of students. Lectures and seminars are good for large groups where it's one-to-many. It's a lecturer speaking to 50 students. Well, that's efficient. It could be a lecturer talking to 100 students. That's efficient. One-to-one might be seen as very inefficient, although it may have better quality outcomes for the one person who's affected. The student who has one-to-one training from a lecturer, from a tutor, may understand deeper the situations that he or she is confronting. Lectures and seminars don't meet all learning styles. People learn differently. Some people learn by sitting and taking notes and listening to the lecturer. Some people want to experiment and think about things and discuss in groups. Others simply want to go and read first-hand accounts in the library and from books and journals and so on. Different people want to do things differently. So lectures and seminars are not the only way to learn, and they may not be the most appropriate way for all students or all trainees. Learning aims and objectives can be set to the pace of the learner, making this more student-centered. Well, there should be aims and objectives and learning outcomes set so that the lecturer is following a syllabus, and the syllabus should be coherent and logical. So the student or the trainee or the person who's under instruction will have a more coherent view, a more logical view of the whole process. However, it is one way learning. The lecturer dictates information to the learner. The learner, except in seminar situations, the learner may be able to ask questions and feedback comments and make criticisms. Informed criticisms, of course. But it is essentially one way. It comes from knowledge and experience, and all of that comes from the lecturer. Comes from the lecturer and goes to the student. So it's one way. Large amounts of information can be communicated, further challenging the student. So in lectures, it's up to the lecturer, but they must follow the syllabus and they must have the learning outcomes in mind. But the lecturer can cover every conceivable point and have a very detailed discussion and use very interesting presentation techniques and perhaps overhead projectors or smart boards or some sort of computerized process for teaching. So it can be very detailed. There can be a lot of information put across in the lecture. However, the students are in passive rather than active role. The students are sitting, it's one way, as I said, students are sitting there receiving the information. They're passively receiving it. In a lecture, they don't make comments. They don't criticize or get upset or ask questions. Or the students are passively taking in what's coming at them. It's coming from the lecturer to them. In the seminars, of course, they may be able to ask questions and resolve issues and so on. So it's really for the students to make notes, try to understand the lecture as it happens, and perhaps in the margins write down the questions, the things that they don't understand, the bits that they don't understand. Write them in the margins and bring it up in the seminar and try and, or speak to their colleagues after the lecture and see if someone else has had the same question or if they understand it, and try to learn from their colleagues. And if all fails, bring it up in the seminars or seek a tutorial with the lecturer. The lecturer has better control. The lecturer is in charge of the lecture, is in charge of the pace at which the information is delivered, the type of information, the technology for the delivery of the message, the delivery of the lecture. The lecturer really is in charge of the situation. Of course, the lecturer must have good speaking skills and subject knowledge in order to engage the student. It's imperative that the lecturer understands the material and can speak about the material effectively and fluently. And in seminar situations, when they're discussing issues associated with the lecture, they may wish to bring up different points. Students may wish to bring up different points, and the lecturer should have a depth of knowledge to enable him or her to address those questions within the context of what happened in the lecture. So the lecturer should be skilled and fluent in all of the issues associated with the topic. Outdoor training. Well, again, advantages and disadvantages. Develop team working skills and relationship with colleagues. Well, outdoor training can be problem solving. It could be at a training centre, for example, or an assessment centre of some sort. And here there will be the trainees will be given different tasks, different problems to solve, and they might have to work with colleagues, work in teams, and they will develop various skills and learn the advantages of working with each other. It can be costly to set up and also time consuming. The organisation will have to pay for the trainees to attend, they'll have to pay for the facilities at the centre, they will have to factor all of that into their training budgets and into their accounts. So it can be costly, and that could be a drawback of using this system. It does encourage team working and problem solving skills, and in a sense in organisations, in companies, we do work in teams. We work in various teams, and the teams link to other teams, and that's what makes up the company. There will be different parts of the company, but they're all being pulled in the same direction to try and achieve, presumably, the strategic goals of the business. Outdoor training is not suitable for everybody's learning needs. Some employees may dislike working in groups or attending learning events. Some employees may prefer to work on their own. It doesn't mean that they're bad workers or they have low productivity. In fact, they could be very highly productive. It just means their personality types. They want to work on their own. They don't want to work in teams. They don't want to spend energy learning about others or talking to others or building up a spirit, a team spirit with others. They want to work on their own, perhaps, and that's the most effective way for them to work. So it's not for everyone. Outdoor training, this type of activity, is not for everybody. Activities such as role plays and games help with employee motivation. So some people will enjoy outdoor events and outdoor activities because it'll enable them to form good working relationships with their colleagues. They will empathize with the objectives of the whole program because they're enjoying themselves. They will relate to the organization and they will enjoy the whole activity. So they'll be more motivated as a consequence. However, it can have a negative impact on productivity if employees are not attending a scheduled day at work. So training schemes means that the employees are released from work, which means the work that they would have done may not be completed in that day. So productivity will be lower. The employees are away from their place of work. So productivity may be affected. Attending conferences and seminars enables networking skills. So sending certain key employees to conferences and seminars may enable them to network with others and This could be to the advantage of the organization. They may pick up new ideas, and they may develop contacts with other organizations, which could be to the benefit of the organization itself later on. Business-related games. Well, encourages problem-solving skills. A lot of business games are very sophisticated. They're computer-controlled. They have stochastic, or if you like, random elements built in, which is very similar to real businesses. We don't know what the future is. Things just happen in the future. So companies have to respond to the situation they find themselves in, and the same applies in business games. The players have to confront a variety of situations, and it's very difficult for them to work out what the solutions are, but they have to try and problem solve, think it through. The disadvantage is it can cause boredom of activity if the activity, I should say, is not suited to the right level. Business games, as I said, can be very sophisticated, and if the employees or the trainees or the students, whoever it is that's using them, if they haven't got a background which is sufficiently expert in the area, if they haven't got an expertise in that area, they haven't got the experiences, they haven't covered enough reading or enough theory or enough understanding, and the game is sophisticated, they're going to be bored because they don't know what to do. And they're going to feel alienated and feel depressed maybe because they performed so badly. In fact, the game was at the wrong level for them. It's important to have games that are suitable for the skills, abilities, training, understanding, background of the students. They should not be way beyond them. So games come at different levels, and the appropriate level should be used for the trainees who are confronting the game. The games could be related to real-life scenarios and demonstrates principles and concepts. Business games, as I said, can be very sophisticated, and it's important that the people playing the games, the students playing the games, have the skills and backgrounds to enable them to make logical analysis out of the data that's coming off the games. So for example, let's say it's a company and the company wants to know if it cuts the price, what will happen? Well, supply and demand analysis. Now, that means that the students should understand basic microeconomics. But it may also be the case that the government in the game, let's say, is about to embark on trade arrangements, a trade deal with some country. Does that mean imports will come from that country, which will threaten the organization as well? In other words, the students of the games should have a whole range of background theories and knowledge and ideas that can be brought to bear on the game so that they can more effectively analyze the game and try and work out what the solutions are. The learner is guided through the correct procedures, but may not understand the logic behind the actions. So games tend to be like that. They can guide the user through various levels, but trying to understand the logic of what's going on might be difficult. They may need expert advice. They may need a tutor to explain why certain things happened. Why did certain outcomes arise? So it's important that the trainee has the background, has the theories, and has the armaments, if you like, the intellectual armaments to take on the game. The activities are fun and entertaining and encourages motivation. Generally speaking, people like playing business games. It is fun, but it must be at the right level, as I said. And they should have the right intellectual equipment, the right background understanding of theories and readings, and understand issues in business or whatever they're studying, whatever the game's about. They should have that to enable them to play it effectively. It can cause unnecessary pressure if employees are put under unfavourable circumstances. Sometimes games can be very demanding with a lot of information, and it's difficult for the people playing the game to assimilate all the information and make sense of it. And they can become frustrated and annoyed because it's simply too much, it's too complex. And yet the game may be very similar to what arises and what confronts businesses on a day-to-day basis. So it may be a very accurate portrayal of real business life, but just when it's on a screen, on a computer screen perhaps, and people are working on the game, it's a lot to take in, and they may become frustrated. It builds team cohesion and encourages healthy competition. Business games can lead to competition, and healthy competition, when people try to outsmart each other and perhaps change the variables to their advantage and change their strategies and so on. So it can be a good simulation of business. But sometimes it doesn't encourage a lot of critical thinking. Sometimes it's people are insufficiently critical of the game, or sometimes they can see through the game and they can see what's required very easily. And because it is a computer game, it's quite determined. Unlike real business, which faces new situations every day. The economy is changing, technology is changing, the government has new policies. There are so many issues confronting business every day, new issues. It's a very complex thing to do, to run a business. Whereas with a computer game, the computer, generally speaking, does not contrive scenarios which are constantly evolving, constantly changing, and constantly becoming more complex. It tends to be quite a static environment in many respects. Role play behavior modeling. Well, with this one, interactive activity, and it's fun to take part in. So it's an interactive activity, role play. It's people pretending to be other people, pretending to have particular functions, for example. So some people will become the managing director of the business, role play that position. Other people will become marketing director. Some people may become production director or whatever. And what they have to do is to try and solve situations and negotiate and find solutions to problems. So it's very interactive. It's quite fun because people are adopting a new persona, a new personality. Not all learners will take part, especially if they are shy, and it can be threatening and intimidating activity. So it depends on the personality types, and it may be difficult for some people to become involved in this type of activity. It encourages experiential learning. Learners are put into real-life situations. So if it's done properly, there is some sort of experience to be gained from it, and there's experiential learning arising from that. So it could be useful. But it does not put the learner in a real-life situation. Role plays are controlled activities and mainly guided activities. There will be a facilitator, someone who will provoke comment and provoke reaction and try to deal with the situations and try to introduce new problems and new issues that confront the players. But the players are, in a sense, pretending to be others, so they have they try to adopt the issues and the problems and try to solve those problems, and in so doing they're gaining the experience of operating in that role. Concepts and principles can be portrayed through role-play activities. It's possible to have role-play, and it could be used for teaching, where one person adopts a particular role, another person yet another role within the organisation, and through communications and discussions and bargaining, principles and concepts are understood more clearly. If not carefully constructed, can cause confusion, especially if the activity involves larger groups of learners. And that's the problem with role play. It has to be controlled very carefully. It has to be set up very carefully. There has to be clear understanding on the part of all the players, and there has to be good scenarios, very clear scenarios set out, and there should be clear learning objectives that are should come out of the whole activity. Otherwise, the participants will feel that it evaporated at the end. It came to nothing. The only thing they will have is the experience of pretending to be some person in a particular role. But there was no real long-term learning. So the whole activity has to be carefully planned, designed, and implemented. It does allow the learners to be confident and encourages critical thinking. They do get confidence because they're looking at the world from a different perspective. And they can become critical thinkers because they're presented with scenarios and they're presented with situations of negotiation with other players in the game, and they have to think through those and try to resolve issues and try to get the best advantage for their organization. So it does involve quick thinking. It is difficult to assess if learning takes place. It's very difficult to assess the whole concept of role play and see what the outcomes are and see what has been learned, and also to see if it is an efficient way of learning. The fact that it happens doesn't make it necessarily efficient, but part of that may be down to that the game was not properly set up or explained, or the scenarios were unclear, or the roles were not clear, and the relationship between the roles was not clear, and so on. So maybe the preparation is the issue that needs to be looked at more fully, but it's difficult to assess what the net benefits of this type of role play activity are. So now we've looked at training methods from different angles and different perspectives, and that's all we're going to deal with in this session. So we're going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.